Allyssa LaScala here from Fit with Liz. Thanks for joining me tonight on Sunday. I wanted to talk to you guys tonight about gluten-free products, if the practice of being gluten-free is really worth it, what it exactly means. You know, it's just become such a craze or, a fad to a lot of people anymore that they don't really understand the value and if it really would make a difference in achieving their health or fitness goals. And this weekend, depending on where you're tuning in from, there was actually a pretty local, gluten-free Expo that was around, and they were giving away a bunch of different, gluten-free products and samples. And so, with the spirit of having people talk a lot about how gluten-free had changed their lives, especially because I made a post about it earlier this week, just asking people if they had tried it or if they still incorporate it. I wanted to really talk to you guys about why it is or isn't, valuable for you to do that. So if you are tuned in, even if you're just joining us as we go, if you practice being gluten-free, or if you're someone that has tried it before, type me. I'm just really curious to see how many people we get on here that actually do practice it or have tried it. If you haven't, hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea of whether it could be like a beneficial practice for you. But I welcome your guys' questions. We're going to talk about different gluten-free foods, like the pros and cons to things you want to look out for on there, just because a lot of companies anymore, it's become just something that they're using as basically a marketing technique to just say it's gluten-free, but is it really? A lot of times they can't guarantee that it's not cross-contaminated, or people don't realize that just because it doesn't say, like wheat or gluten on the label, that they don't realize that there could still be gluten in there. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different things like that, but if you have questions as we go ahead and post them and I'll address them as we go. But the first thing I want to talk about is because some people really don't know what gluten is, and it's really just a protein that's found in wheat. So it's not something that was really talked as much about until probably like the early 2000s. Like in 1996, they were talking about how celiac was not that common. Celiac disease is actually when you're completely allergic to gluten. But there's just been some, thrashing in the health and fitness world, I feel like, where people are getting pissed that some people are jumping on the gluten-free bandwagon, and they're like, well, you don't even know what celiac is. You shouldn't even be eating gluten-free. You don't even know what it means. And I feel like there's just so much hatred and negative energy going on that, you don't have to have celiac disease to decide to practice gluten-free. But for those people that do have celiac disease and that are completely allergic to gluten, they have to. It's literally like a life or death situation for them. And so, you realize that there are actually a lot of people now, it's becoming more and more acknowledged that people have a gluten intolerance. And that's actually what I have. But, every 1 out of, 133 people have celiacs. Every 1 out of 7 people have a gluten intolerance of some sort. And there's different degrees. There's some people who will notice that they, have a really extreme intolerance to it. And then there's other people that could get away with it if they're, a little more careful about how often they consume it. They may not really notice much of a difference. But there are so many different, reasons for people to want to be gluten-free. But I want to talk to you guys about that because it really can be beneficial, but you have to make sure that you're doing it the right way and that you're still looking at the labels for the correct parts. So wanted to go over the difference between, the gluten allergy and the intolerance. It is different, but both are very important, guys. So if someone wants to go gluten-free, let them go gluten-free. Let them try it. It's okay. I don't feel like we need to have any hatred towards people just because, they want to try a new practice. But there's, there are a bunch of different theories as to why the gluten sensitivity is happening. And so, you guys can make up your own decisions. You can, do your own research if you want. But a lot of people are saying that it's not really the gluten issue. It's how wheat is being processed anymore. So the fact that they want to be able to, spray Roundup on everything and be able to harvest crops that much faster, and it's becoming so much less nutrient dense. Guys, there are so many different theories as to why celiac and gluten intolerance is becoming so much more prevalent. But the fact is that it's happening. And so people don't really realize that just because they go on a nutrition label and it doesn't say, wheat or gluten, they think that it's not in there. And so that's kind of the next thing I wanted to talk to you about. Jason, would you say that the other day she literally said she's celiac, but she's in Italy? Yeah. So, there's a lot of people that they say they have celiac, but if you did, and there's a test specifically for that. But when it comes to all the different products that gluten is in, a lot of people don't realize that gluten is used as a filler or like a binding agent in a lot of different things, such as, you know, ketchup, mayonnaise, mustard. Like there's a whole list, and I'm actually going to post it in the comments afterwards, like a little chart of the different foods that you probably don't even realize that gluten is in. And it may not say gluten-free on the label, but you're thinking there's no way that there's gluten in here. Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, even ice creams, like they want to be able to use it as a thickening agent. So there are a lot of different things that you probably wouldn't think of, that if you realize that you're sensitive to gluten, that it's something that you may still be incorporating into your diet and you don't even realize it's harmful for you. So then the next question a lot of people say is, okay, well, how do I know if I'm gluten sensitive? Like, I know I don't have celiacs. I got tested for that when I had a lot of stomach issues, but I knew that my stomach was still off. And so me consuming gluten on a daily basis, because I love my breakfast. Like, I was a total like pancake and cereal. Like, I'm the type of person that would sit there with a bowl and, you know, my almond milk and a box of cereal, and so I don't have to get up. I was constantly refilling it. Like, I love my breakfast foods, but I realized I was having an overindulgence in gluten. And so there are a couple of different ways that you can test for gluten sensitivity. There is blood tests that you can see what foods you are and aren't sensitive to. They actually mix your blood with different food antigens and see if it reacts. So that's what I got done. But guys, honestly, you can do this by just being very conscious and like diligent about looking at what foods you're consuming and then how you feel afterwards, honestly. I mean, that's what I do with most of my clients. If they want to go get some type of blood test done, they can, but I'm pretty easily able to identify if someone's going to be sensitive to specific foods, specifically gluten. So if someone goes and, you know, they cut out foods for 4 to 6 weeks that have gluten in them, and then they reintroduce them back in, if you would go and do that, you'd be very surprised about how easy it is to notice if you have a sensitivity. So it is something that you could do on your own. But I mean, as far as like the intolerance symptoms for gluten goes, honestly, anxiety, depression, fatigue, brain fog, like a lack of mental clarity, like those are really common ones, like bloating, gut issues. That was the more prominent one for me. But I literally could tell you, like, if I sat down, like Jason was saying that, you know, someone went to Italy and she's completely enjoying like all the foods over there or whatever you're doing, or a lot of people like in Italian families, like you'll notice that if you sit down and you have like your bread or pasta or things that are, you know, more well known for gluten, like I know I would fall asleep within like 30 minutes. Like, ask my husband, I could pick exactly what foods that I would eat, where if I just wanted to be able to pass out afterwards, I know exactly what I should have. So, you know, just being more knowledgeable about that stuff. But honestly, if you're having a lot of gut issues, I encourage you to just try it for like 2 weeks, like 2 weeks minimum. I would say a week probably isn't long enough because you want to be able to cleanse your system out like that, but like at least 2 weeks. And I have had clients feel so much better just by cutting out, you know, primarily gluten, just for, you know, 2 weeks, and seeing how much better their energy level is. Their fatigue has gone down a lot, their ability to be able to focus. So, you know, that all goes in with the gut health that we talked about before. So a lot of people will say then, okay, well, what can I eat then? You know, I feel like people with a gluten intolerance can't have a lot of stuff, and you know, you go to like almost any restaurant anymore and you see that they have a gluten-free menu, or they have like a little star or some type of note next to things that may say GF on them. Okay, so it's becoming something that's a little bit more accepted, and I'm glad that people are doing things to, you know, support those people that have gluten-free issues. But you know, it's something that you can absolutely navigate through. You know, if you're someone that consumes a lot of processed foods, I'll get to your questions in a second, Stephanie and Steven. But if you're somebody that has a lot of processed foods, it is a little bit more difficult, because that's where, you know, and like I said, I'll post a list of the other names that gluten is in the nutrition label that you may not realize. That's where it gets a little fussier. So start off trying to get like a lot of less processed foods, like completely cut them out. Breakfast foods, like guarantee almost every breakfast food will probably have gluten in it, that is like carbohydrate based. You know, going from like the waffles or basically any type of cereal. I mean, even, you know, gluten-free Cheerios that they had now, you know, Cheerios made like 5 different brands of their Cheerios available to be gluten-free. Well, they just had like millions of dollars of, recalled boxes because they had people calling in complaining that they were feeling sick even on the gluten-free ones, and they went and saw they were cross-contaminated boxes where they sent millions and millions of them out. And so, they were going to have a big lawsuit against them because you can't guarantee that it's not cross-contaminated. So when you have any processed foods like that, it makes it a lot more difficult to guarantee that it indeed is gluten-free. But if you're looking at just like your fruits and vegetables, guys, like they're gluten-free. If you're looking at, like your nuts and your healthy fats, I mean, people don't realize, like, if you're eating like actual foods and then like proteins and whatnot, it's a lot easier to find more gluten-free stuff like that than ones that are processed. But let me see, Steven, what'd you say? Does gluten-free affect blood sugar level, diabetes? I've been reading through a couple of studies, especially type 1 diabetes in young kids. They've been starting to tie it in that it's a very high percentage of those with type 1 diabetes are actually, they actually have celiac disease as well. So it does tie in with that. Of course, they're always making new connections, but yes, it absolutely affects your blood sugar level. When you're thinking about the things that people have that have gluten in it, think a lot of times, Stephen, that has a lot of, carbs and sugar. And so of course that's going to affect your insulin level. So it's not maybe like a direct correlation, but the way that you process foods once you have a gluten sensitivity absolutely makes a difference. Stephanie, you said, are the same results similar with kiddos? Have you ever had clients or you have a personal experience? So I don't know exactly what you were talking about when you type that in about what the results are. But yeah, if you go through, if you're talking about cutting out foods and seeing if you're sensitive to them, I mean, you can notice it in kids and you can absolutely notice it with adults. So like I said, with type 1 diabetes, it's being directly tied in. So it's something that, anybody could experience, especially now. Like I know when I was a kid, if I wanted to prepare my own food, I was having cereal for almost every meal. Like my brother and I loved Eggo waffles, or toaster strudels, like literally everything was carbohydrate based, and most things with carbs in it, like a lot of them, especially processed, have the gluten in them. So we were having it left and right. And I look back and I realize, I'm like, oh my God, like literally gluten was my food group. That's exactly what I was having. But people don't really realize how much stuff's in there because they look on the label and they're like, oh, if it doesn't say gluten, then it doesn't have gluten. And that's not the case at all. Stephanie, I guess your detoxifying period, you mentioned 2 weeks. Would that be the same for kids? I'm saying 2 weeks minimum, honestly. Professionals, suggest 4 to 6 weeks, but I know how impatient people can be. So that's why I just say a minimum of 2 weeks, because I've noticed clients doing it for, 1 week and they see great results with it. They can already tell already. But when you go to trying to see if you are sensitive and you're trying to eliminate all gluten-free foods and then reintroduce them back in, that's when you want that longer time period, because you need to have enough time to be able to detoxify your body like you're talking to. I know that you said that nutrition-wise, is this okay for kids getting what they need? Being gluten-free, you can still get everything you need. There's no reason that you need gluten to be nutritionally healthy at all. Like there's no reason that you need wheat. There isn't, because you can get carb sources from, there are plenty of other grains. I mean, if you're looking at alternatives for even baking, like I've made an apple pie with like almond flour or brown rice flour, coconut flour. Like there are so many alternatives out there that people don't really realize, just because we got so used to having gluten and stuff. Now there are some things that it's like, if you try to have a gluten-free Pop-Tart, honestly, like I think it's like, if you're just going to eat it, like just eat the freaking Pop-Tart, because there are just some things that like, if you don't have gluten in them, I think they just really taste like crap. But there's no reason that like you won't have any type of like macro or micronutrient deficiency just by cutting out gluten. You can absolutely find ways to, still incorporate carbohydrates. So it's not an essential at all. So when it comes to, gluten-free foods that you want to be on the lookout for as far as they could have like negative effects, you're welcome, Stephanie, no problem. I'm always here to help. If you have any more questions, go ahead and post them. But as far as, foods that you want to look out for, because I know when I made the post the other day, some people were commenting and being like, I don't really do gluten-free foods, because you have to realize they could be high in fat, they could be high in carbs and blah, blah, blah. And it's very true. I mean, non-gluten-free foods can be like that too. I mean, it really doesn't matter. You can look at even just milk fat alone, like you have ice cream, look how much sugar and fat can be in there. But you have to look at the label and see just because it's gluten-free doesn't mean it's healthier for you. It doesn't have gluten, but it doesn't mean it's healthy. So you have to realize that there are a lot of times like higher like carbs and sugars in there. You have a lot of products that like when they're pulling out wheat, when they're pulling out gluten, a lot of times they replace it with corn. And a lot of times people don't realize that with corn, that's a really high inflammatory food. So like if you're looking at like the top 6 inflammatory foods that you could consume, like dairy is a big one and corn is a big one. I can tell my husband some because my fur babies are going crazy. But corn is huge. So, you know, you're switching out gluten. It's like if you're someone that's not, you know, someone that doesn't have celiacs, so you're just doing this because you have a sensitivity, a lot of times you could still have just as big of, you know, stomach issues if you go and you're doing, you know, gluten-free foods, but they have corn instead of the gluten in there, because corn is so inflammatory. I mean, think about how like you know you don't really digest corn. If you have corn on the cob, you know it's probably coming out the same way that it went looking in. So like it doesn't digest the same way. So you're not getting a lot of that you know, nutritional benefit. So Stephanie, to kind of like answer your question when it comes to like other nutrients, you may want to make sure that like if you're doing gluten-free foods, just looking and seeing like, okay, well, if it doesn't have the gluten in it, like what are they replacing it with? Like, what are they trying to use as an alternative? I like to look for like something that's like, if you're doing, if you're not doing like wheat pasta, you're doing like brown rice pasta instead of like corn pasta. Like it really does make a difference. So just be educated with that. Like if I'm doing gluten-free waffles, like I don't want ones that are made from corn. Like I look for brown rice flour. So go and look for those ones. And there's definitely suggestions I can give as far as like if you're someone that has specific foods that like you really like, but you want to look for a gluten-free version, let me know and I'll try and give you my suggestion. You know, I'm still always exploring. There's a million out there. It's a huge market anymore. But guys, if you have specific suggestions, like let me know, post them below. What's your favorite gluten-free food? You know, and I'm really curious to know what's the biggest challenge that you guys have eating gluten-free. Like I know a lot of people, you know, they're trying to be able to consume foods that are gluten-free, but they don't realize that it is so hidden in the label that it's something that's really difficult for them. So, you know, if you guys have any questions, like I said, feel free to post them. I will address them after I post this live. But I'm gonna post the chart that I was talking about that has the foods that you wouldn't think of that actually do have gluten in them as like fillers or binding agents, and then different names for gluten that would be on the label that doesn't say gluten, but that's basically what it means. So thank you guys so much for joining. Hopefully this helps you figure out whether this could be something that could be beneficial or not. But I'm saying no matter who you are, try for 2 weeks and see how much better you feel, because I'm telling you, it completely changed my life. If you're someone that has IBS or irritable bowel syndrome and stomach issues, this could be a huge component for you. So have a good Sunday, guys. Hope you guys all meal prep for the week, and I will see you later.